I know my voice, and it was in vogue and then out of vogue and then randomly it's back in vogue again, which is so weird because it's, Scrubs, when I pitched Scrubs, I said this in one meeting of someone that didn't buy it as a joke, but the dude was like, I don't think you can switch gears from broad, silly comedy to people caring emotionally about life and death. I was like, I don't know, I feel like if you turn the lights down and play an indie song, you probably can. And Harrison lives up my street. When we wrote this, Brett and I are like a blue-collar shrink, Parkinson's older guy. Harrison Ford would be like a great comp for it, perfect dude. And I'm like, I'm gonna go ask him. And he's like, do you know him? I'm like, he doesn't know me, but I know him. And I asked him, and he said he'd read it. And then I was working in Florida.
Wait, you asked him like you knocked on his door?
No, I got through channels. I'm like, hey, you came to my Easter party once because I live down the street. And you read this script? And he's like, are you legit? And I'm like, yeah, man. I worked on a bunch of shows. He checked me out. And he read the script, and then I was in Florida working, and he called me up. And he's like, my phone rang, and it said Harrison Ford. I'm like, oh, this is fucking weird. And I'm like, hey, he's like, hey, I read the pilot. I really like it, but I'm not in it a lot. Would I be in the second episode more? I'm like, dude, you can be in it as much as you want.
You're Harrison Ford.
You can be in every scene if you want, man. You just got to say the word. And then he's like, well, what's the next step? I'm like, well, the next step is you got to meet Jason Segel. And he's like, who's that? And I'm like, I can send you some movies of his. He's like, all right. And he watched him. This is a true story. You watched him, and you guys saw Sarah Marshall.
Yeah.
So it was full frontal nudity in it.
Yeah.
So Jason has on his wall. Harrison sent me and Jason a text. He's like, watched Sarah Marshall, enjoyed it. Nice penis.
I would print that text.
It is. It's on his wall.
Oh my God.
And then he's like, I'm in London shooting Indiana Jones, and I'm like, all right, now you're gonna meet Brett Goldstein. And he's like, who's he? I'm like, he plays Roy on Ted Lasso. He's like, what's Ted Lasso? I'm like, don't worry about it. I go, Brett's gonna come over and have drinks with you. And then Harrison calls me up and he goes, I like that guy. So you and that guy are gonna be running the show? I'm like, nah, Brett's in London. He's like, why did I have to meet him? I'm like, don't worry about it. He's right there. So I think we just confused Harrison into eventually working with us. If I was Jason, I have a partner on that show, Jason Sudeikis, and if you guys know anything of the history of the show, Ted Lasso was a character he invented. He was the first person that ever brought my brand to me, and what I mean by that is the old Ted Lasso commercials, if you haven't seen them, go watch them, they're funny. They're like an SNL sketch, but they're loud and bawdy and no heart, and he came to me and he said, I really want to put in the heart of like Scrubs around this Ted Lasso guy, and I want to do a show about mentorship and self-care. I think what Jason taught me is that there are no rules anymore. You guys understand, I started out with you, at the end of the day, the person running the room would say, we got to count the jokes on the page, because multi-camera sitcoms, you'd be like, we like to average around 3 jokes a page. So the genres have changed, the amount of time that it takes to do it has changed. I think it's evolved because Jason is savvy enough to realize that people are into that show enough that they will watch a 58-minute episode of a comedy just to see Danny Rojas, run. And he's right, man. You guys know it. If you make projects yourself, anything you make, isn't it so weird when you make it shorter and it just works better sometimes when you strip out the stuff that you thought mattered so much? So, but he's crushing it this year. I think it's a huge responsibility to end that show, and I think he crushed it. Being true to your voice. I have tons of stinkers and shit bombs in my past. I'm lucky that most of the really horrible ones never got on TV. And the worst ones are ones where I tried to do something that I thought would sell instead of something that was in my voice. And there's one of them that still you can see. And I was convinced, a buddy and me were convinced that we could make a TV show version of Rush Hour. It's so bad. It's so, and by the way, and I wrote so much of it, it's so awful. And it hurts my heart when I see it, and Wendy Malick is on Shrinking because when that was over, she said, literally, she's like, you owe me a better job. And I'm like, I know. I'm like, you can be Harrison Ford's girlfriend. Will you please speak to me again? And when I grew up, you guys probably saw this too, you would do, if you were on a show that worked, the next year there'd be 5 copycats, and none of them ever work. So my only piece of advice on that is there's no wrong voice. The cool thing is it used to be network TV, you'd be like, hey, come up with a show that appeals to everyone in the world. It's impossible. Now, if you come up to something that just appeals to a niche audience, you're fine. So figure out what your thing is and stick with it hard. Every script of every show, every Shrinking episode, when the writers were done with it, I took it home and rewrote it, sometimes to do what I call the lateral punch down, is when you're just changing it for no reason other than you're in your head. But the main reason you do it is because you want it to sound like the show that you wrote sounded, right? And so you're allowed to put your name on it. I could say, what's your full name?
Mine?
Yeah.
Joshua Ritter.
Josh. So if you wrote a script, Josh Ritter, I could say, if I wanted to, I took it home the weekend, I rewrite it. I could go, now it's written by Bill Lawrence and Josh Ritter. If you noticed, like on West Wing, Aaron Sorkin wrote every episode because he took that home and did it. The bummer of that is when you do that, I don't get any extra money because I'm under an overall deal and I get paid the same no matter what. You get 50% less for your script because I just wrote half of it. And so it's my pet peeve.
You don't get any, but they still cut 50%?
So to me, this is my pet peeve. If you acknowledge that we're all doing this together and it's a communal thing, don't ever, you can take as much credit as you want because it's part of the game, but don't ever take money out of someone else's pocket because you badly need to see your name up there.